What's up, guys? It's the Baller Sports Dialogue podcast. It's your co-hosts Brandon Deutsch and Graham Mona here today after our predictions podcast, a week and a half back. Just an update on what's going on, and let's just get straight into it. We're not going to have a guest today; it's just going to be us, kind of talking about that. I wanted to go through a couple of these advanced metrics first, playoff advanced metrics. I know throughout the regular season we did just EFG, true shooting percentage, offensive and defensive rating for the regular season. Those statistics are also analyzed throughout the postseason as well, thanks to NBA.com. We can analyze them, do whatever, but from right off the bat, the defensive rating of 94.2 for the Bucks is the most dominant by far. I know the Bulls are struggling. They really only had one good game, and DeMar DeRozan obviously played great in that game. It's like we mentioned in the previous podcast, right? Without Lonzo Ball, this is a 4 or 5 game series. Looks like we were correct on this one. But it's interesting to see the other two, Miami Heat in second with 104, Memphis in third with 107 defensive ratings, showing that they're really, throughout the series so far, being pretty consistent on the defensive end. I mean, I know in the regular season, Memphis was third overall in defense as well. They're third in the playoffs. Looks like Milwaukee, like we were saying last week, would turn it up a notch with their defense in the postseason. They did. Miami is a great team. They're still up there. Offensive rating, Golden State, 125.4, which is like ridiculous. It's interesting. The Pelicans have the second best offensive rating this postseason, the 119.2. So those are all stuff we're going to get into. Obviously, Boston's played well with their offensive rating. Advanced shooting metrics loved the Nets, but obviously the series didn't. 4-0 Boston. EFG was second for the Nets at 57.7, probably because of Kevin Durant. They shot well. They just didn't shoot well when it mattered, right? True shooting percentage. Brooklyn's also second. Golden State's first in both. So Golden State's turned into a different animal in the playoffs. We kind of figured that would happen with Jordan Poole back dominating. Who was my vote for most improved. I know a lot of people thought Desmond Bane should get it. Neither of them were finalists. John Morant got it. Congratulations to Ja. But yeah, so we're going to kind of go into that. We know Golden State is a dominant team, but I wanted to start with the series everyone has been talking about, which is Brooklyn getting swept by the Celtics and what people thought would be a 7-game series. Grant, what are your thoughts on that before I get into it?
It's a shock to me, but it isn't. And there's two reasons why. First of all, we knew how good the Celtics were coming in, how hot they were coming in. So, it's not really a shock there. The other shock to me is how badly the two stars on the Nets performed. I mean, I I, I don't think I can go back and kind of point out to another series for the last 5 years to where Kevin Durant looked that bad. I mean, he looked I mean, I don't know if it was his performance or if it was the Celtics defense because we got to get. I mean, and a lot of people are talking about Kevin Durant in this series and how badly he's performed, but we got to give the Celtics defense some credit here. I mean, goodness, they had a perfect plan to get after him. They have all the right guys to put on him. You can throw Tatum, Smart, Brown on him. You can go length with Horford, which they did for some time. Um, and I think it just disrupted everything they wanted to do. And the Nets weren't that good to begin with. I mean, look at they were a 7 seed. They barely got into the play-in. They barely beat the Cavaliers. And you know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, should they even deserve to be there? Well, yeah. I mean, they got in there pretty comfortably. They skated by the Cavs barely, but it was pretty much a blowout. But you get to these. This is what happens when you win the play-in. You got to face the 2 seed, man, and the Celtics, a lot of people overlooked, and me kind of. I mean, I knew that the Celtics were probably going to win, but I didn't think they would win in this convincing of a fashion. So I think we got to give credit more to the Celtics defense as opposed to the stars that didn't perform because there's a reason they didn't perform. Of course, Kyrie went off in the first game, but after that, it was just a mess of games for them, and they just really couldn't find any rhythm. The Celtics did everything they needed to do. This is like peak Celtics this year. it was like, okay, we had a shaky first game, just like they had a shaky first half. Now we're gonna dominate the rest. It's crazy because they were close games, but you can tell who the better team was. So, um, a lot of talk is about about the net stars, but we got to talk about those Celtic stars because Tatum is entering this top 5, top 10 category really quickly.
And you bring up some really good points. The Celtics season, was indicative of this playoff series, like you mentioned. First game, they kind of, I wouldn't say they got lucky because that was a good move by Tatum to do the spin, but they were dead in the water, in my opinion, with that Kyrie dagger with about 25, 30 seconds to go. And they came back and they played some good defense. There were some free throw issues. A lot of what doesn't get talked about is, you know, Durant missed that big time free throw in game three, which is a game they definitely could have won. It's very close. And that's not the Kevin Durant we're accustomed to seeing in the past. Um, Obviously, he is one of the most gifted scorers in the history of the game, probably top 20, 30 player all time as of right now, if he ended his career right now. Some argue top 15. Talent wise, might even be top 10, top five. We get that, right? But, this whole skilled players of Kyrie and Kevin Durant, I think that was just put down right away after this series. Kyrie really did not show up after that first game, which he was marvelous. He put on an outstanding showing in game one with over 35 points. But the rest of the games, he couldn't get a shot going. And that's a testament to Boston's number one ranked defense. But if you look at the advanced metrics of each game, Boston's offense late in the game was what got them going. Tatum scoring. Even Smart was hitting some big time threes in every single series, every single down the stretch series of possessions. Grant Williams hitting threes. Then when Robert Williams came back, you could just lock it in. That series was over because that was the big thing going into it. Okay, it's Daniel Theis and Al Horford. Are they going to be able to hold down the fort? And they did for 2 games, 2 close games. And that's a testament to how dominant the Celtics team is. And look, we got to give credit where credit's due. No one thought this would be a 4-game series. I thought it'd be 6, and people gave me crap saying, dude, Brooklyn's going to win. I said all year that Brooklyn, well, not at the beginning of the year. I changed my mind once I saw the team play. Thought Brooklyn would be really good, but halfway through and toward the end of the season, I said, look, they're not going to win a playoff series. They'll probably get out of the play-in, which I predicted, and everyone was giving me crap about my point saying they're not going to win a playoff series. And look what happened. They didn't, and they were just embarrassing. So they've got a slew of issues to figure it out. If Ben Simmons played, who knows? Obviously it's better defender in there, but he didn't. So they're going to have a lot to figure out this offseason. But I also think it's unfair to just disrespect Kevin Durant's legacy at this time with what the efficiency, and the dominance that he's had as a scorer over the past 12 years of his career is really unprecedented in many ways, efficiency wise. Obviously it went to Golden State and got those rings. People say, okay, you jumped on the 73 team, win team back, but he was the best player in those championship teams. His accomplishments they're not overlooked there, in my opinion. And look, this isn't on Kevin Durant. We said before the series, the Nets have serious depth issues, and look what happened. Nick Claxton couldn't make a free throw to save his life. Drummond wasn't playing down the stretch. They had to rely on an old Blake Griffin to produce at the end of that series because everyone else was there. And Bruce Brown, I said, was great. And Seth Curry, they both played pretty good for the most part. Bruce Brown more than Curry. But it came down to one of those. It can all be on Kevin Durant. He had a couple of bad games, and he played great the last couple games, right? Or the last game. Kyrie had to show up in the 3 games after game one, and he kind of felt defeated, probably like he'd had his best effort in game one, and they just locked him down. Hats off to Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, but they're done. Let's move on to the Warriors, right? So Nuggets won a game, thankfully. I wanted to see a little bit of a series. Thankfully, we're into game 5, but the Warriors obviously look dominant. We mentioned that this is the same team that was, 17-4 at the beginning of the season. Pretty dominant, locked in as like, okay, they're a finals, with them and Phoenix are the finals contenders, right? That's what everyone was saying. They've shown that their defensive rating was number 1 before Draymond went out with that injury. Hasn't been great in the postseason yet, but it hasn't had to be. Jokic is obviously doing a fantastic job, and that's why he deserved MVP, and I have a whole article about that. Again, you can go read that. He did a lot in that game. He's done a lot in this series. And I feel like it's kind of disrespectful to Jokic before we go back into the Warriors that people are disregarding his MVP just because Monte Morris or Aaron Gordon is the second best player. After Joel Embiid hit that game-winning shot to go up 3-0. And we'll get to the Sixers. Don't worry. We'll get to the Sixers because I got those receipts. I got those receipts on the Doc Rivers choking every playoff series known to man. Hopefully he chokes this one. Oh, as a Laker fan, that is up there with the Lakers winning 2-3 playoff series in a season. Him blowing a 3-0 lead, that would be one of my favorite things to happen in the history of sports. And I don't want Doc to fail, but I also kind of do because he's rated a top 15 coach all time, and he's arguably one of the worst coaches in the league in big games. Not arguably, is. There's statistics back that up. But we'll get into that. But they were saying Embiid MVP after, dude, Embiid has like 3 stars on his team besides him. Harden, Maxi's now a star, and Harris is pretty good. He gets paid $20+ million a year. Jokic's second best player is Monte Morris or Aaron Gordon. He doesn't even have Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. So for them to win a game, hats off to them because the Warriors are the best team in the West right now. Obviously, we've seen what's happened with Booker and the Suns, and we'll get into that. But man, with Poole back, Grant, what do you got to say about this Warriors team? They're probably the most equipped to get to the finals. And I know we were talking about injuries. How are they going to play in our predictions podcast? We didn't know this would come to fruition this quickly, right?
No. And, I can safely say the Warriors are back. There was a stretch there at the end of the regular season, kind of mid-season regular season, when they lost Draymond Green, they lost Steph Curry, and everyone's kind of talking about, oh, well, they had a great first half, and, they'll be healthy next year with Wiseman. But here they come. Steph Curry comes back the first game. Draymond Green's healthy, playing great defense like he was before the injury. Um, and they're firing all cylinders. Klay Thompson has found his stroke again too. That was another concern, that Klay Thompson wasn't moving well, and he was off on his shots, and he just doesn't look the same. Oh, he looks the same, man. Like, they feed that guy just like they did in the playoffs in 2019, and he is performing very well. I mean, granted, they're playing not that great of a defense in the Nuggets. We kind of have to reserve our hype here for the next couple rounds because we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Look, they're playing the Nuggets. Nuggets are a good team, but they're not great defensively, and we kind of know that. So it's a kind of a bad matchup for the Nuggets. And they stole a game, like you said. A lot of credit to them. I didn't even think they'd steal a game from the Warriors, but the Warriors with Jordan Poole playing like this, I mean, they could beat anybody in this league in this playoffs. But I'm going to reserve judgment just based on this, is because I kind of want to see how the bench performs in the minutes they're off the court. In the next rounds, say they play the Mavs later down, or they play the Suns, or something like that. We don't. Well, obviously, I'm acting like the Mavs have that series wrapped up. I don't know about that one either, but I'm pretty sure the Mavs have that one wrapped up. But the Timberwolves, the Grizzlies, the teams like that, to where their bench unit, they're no slouches, man. Like, this bench unit for the Nuggets is kind of atrocious. But you get down, further along down the road, and I'm gonna have to see how these Warriors perform. Because look, we know that the Warriors are great, but the thing is their age. They're kind of getting up there. Not getting up there, but they've grown. Their first run was in 2014, and here it's 2022, and they're still going at it. So a lot of credit to them, a lot of credit to those players. I mean, they're playing fantastic, just like they were when they were beating up on my Clippers way back in the day. I'm still scared of them now. So, yeah, they'll easily take this next game, I think, against the Nuggets, and they'll move on. But I'm gonna kind of reserve judgment on them until I see them play against like a better defense for sure, because I know that if they get past this round, there's a lot of great defending teams like the Timberwolves, the Pelicans are long, the Suns are long, and they have great defenders. So I'm gonna reserve judgment until then. But they're firing on all cylinders right now.
Yeah. Um, and look, their defense is going to come back. Hats off to Jokic. Like I mentioned, the only reason why they don't have the best defensive rating in the playoffs so far is because of the matchup. Both offensive-minded teams. Jokic still gets his guys open, which is miraculous considering what he has. But yes, the Warriors are going to be. It's going to be a harder test if they play a Memphis or even Minnesota. Whoever wins that series, that'll be tougher for them. I think that's a 5-game series, and down the road they play the Mavericks or something because Mavericks, Suns, whoever they play down the road. That's where we're going to really see if they're built for that, because injuries do matter, and this is why when we did the predictions podcast a couple weeks ago, how are we supposed to know when I chose the Raptors to beat the 76ers that Scotty Barnes would get hurt, right? And that's a whole different series. It's tied 2-2 right now, or, Raptors up 3-2 if Scotty Barnes was
Yeah,
healthy the whole
Raptors could
series.
be up 3-1 right now.
Oh, exactly, right? Obviously, the first game they just lost, and that was whatever, right? But the other games, they were pretty close in all of them, other than game two, which they didn't have Scotty Barnes. It's a huge difference. That's another story. Congrats on Scotty Barnes winning Rookie of the Year. Really, we don't see a rookie this good and this important in the implications of a playoff series this early on, right? What he can do on both ends of the floor is miraculous, and that's going to be we're going to see what happens in Game 6. So let's go straight to there, right? Because a lot of talk. What we said on the podcast, I don't trust Doc Rivers ever in a playoff series ever. I said I would trust Luke Walton more than Doc Rivers in a playoff series. I stand by that. Maybe in the regular season, Doc Rivers, but sorry, like I'd trust Luke Walton. And that's crazy to say. Think of the worst coach possible. I trust them over Doc Rivers in the playoff series. There is absolutely no drive in this Philadelphia team. Odds are they win one of these last two games, right? Because they've already lost two in a row. The odds are look, but there's no one had ever came back 3-1 when LeBron came back and beat the
Well,
Warriors,
the
right?
the odds were that they were going to win Game 5 at home, and they
They
didn't.
didn't.
So they got
So they're in
blown
a
out.
bad position now. But no, I'm just saying it's hard to lose four games in a row to the same team. You have to be just a miserable coach, to say the least, for that to happen. Uh, and they haven't made adjustments. We'll see if they do. I really hope the Raptors win because I thought that was a clear Raptors in 6 series when I saw that matchup. The Raptors had been playing so good toward the end of the season that I said, Philadelphia, I mean, who's going to shoot their threes, right? I mean, they traded Seth Curry. That's a huge part of their team. People forget the impact that had. Harden can't do what he used to with the foul calls. That's another thing that we talked about. And we're kind of seeing that come to fruition, especially with Embiid's injury, which is obvious. He needs surgery, but he's not going to get it till the offseason because, he's a grinder. He wants to play. He's a competitor. We know that's affecting him. That could affect this series. Siakam's playing great. But we also said the 76ers, they were an average team advanced metrics wise throughout the whole season. They weren't top 10 in anything. You'll never win a championship ever in the history of the game. Well, I guess no one's ever came back from down 3-0 either. Maybe it'll happen eventually, right? But this is the same thing with Brooklyn. Brooklyn wasn't top 10 in anything. Offense, defense, a lot of that is because Kyrie missed a lot of time. Philadelphia, same thing. They're not top 10 in anything, so you can't expect them to go far. And the media was like, oh, this is championship one at the trade deadline with Harden and Embiid playing the way he's playing. But we're obviously seeing that. And look, they're going to have a hard time, even if they get past the Raptors, playing the Miami Heat. So this is going to be a fun last game or two, depending on where it goes. Back in Toronto. And I just want to see a game 7 so bad. Toronto, please win game 6 so we can just see the fear in Doc Rivers and the Sixers' eyes. I don't even look. I would love the Raptors to win that game, but I just want to see a game 7. Give us what we want as NBA fans, right? Like the Pelicans are giving the Suns, and what are your thoughts on the Sixers Raptors series before we go on to Pelicans Suns, which is a really fun series so far?
Doc Rivers, Doc Rivers, Doc Rivers. Here we go again, right? As a Clipper fan, we know all too well about how this goes, and this is eerily similar to how I felt about my Clippers in the bubble, like when they played the Nuggets. It's eerily similar. When we were up 3-1, I was gloating, and I've learned not to do that anymore for any reason. I've learned not to gloat about my team because I know that there's a curse among my team. But when the Nuggets won that game 5, and I was like, okay, it's 3-2 now. I was like, not looking good. And judging by how the Raptors came out and played in game 5 on the road, and they blew out a Sixers team that's loaded, quote unquote loaded. They have two superstars, whatever. That spells bad news for the team that's ahead, which is the Sixers in this case, because when I was a Clippers fan, I could just see it on their faces in game 6. It was like, we can't make any mistakes. We can't do that. They were playing tight. They weren't, moving the ball. And the Sixers are kings of ISO and playing one on one, which is, it's fair in the regular season to do that down the stretch. But in crunch time, especially with how James Harden performs, this spells disaster. This is just disaster waiting because I believe if the Raptors win this game 6, this is Toronto, everybody. Like, the Raptors have one of the best home court advantages in the league. I think people underestimate that. That place is rocking in Toronto, and especially now that they know that they're back in the series, they could have won what was it, game 3, or sorry, game 4. Unfortunately, or actually, sorry, it was game 3, I think, right? Um, and Embiid obviously hit that amazing shot with a second left, but they were on the ropes then. The Raptors could be up 3-1 in this series. They aren't, but being down 3-2, like Nick Nurse said, if you win one, it makes it 3-1, and people have come back from 3-1. So I was right on the train with him to where even with Von Fleet out, I think that they match up so well with that spread offense. Nick Nurse did an amazing thing. He made this offense spread. So he just put, like, kind of what the Clippers did. I keep bringing up the Clippers, I'm sorry, but this is just how I relate to things. The Clippers did this thing with the Jazz, where they just put 5 guys on the perimeter and said, "Okay, you're going to have to guard me out here, and if you don't, we're going to bring you inside." And Joel Embiid has not been that force that he has been in years past on the inside. I know he's a great defender, but with that thumb injury, we've seen that he's kind of been timid these last 2 games. And, whew, man, these Raptors, man, I there's a reason me and you picked them to go to the conference finals, and this is the reason why, right? Is because, well, a chance to go to the conference finals. We didn't, guarantee it, but we said that would be a great matchup. And this is the reason why, because that length, now with, I think, Von Fleet being out helped them, because now they can go all length as opposed to just having Freddie out there with a couple guys, Gary Trent. Now they can go all length with just Gary Trent, or they can just go all length in general. And that spells disaster for these guys, especially Danny Green has no chance against Siakam or Prince Achua, or sorry, Precious Achua. Like, these guys can just rise over them, score. So if the Raptors take game 6, game 7's a toss up. We know this. We've seen 3-1 deficits blown before. So spells disaster. The Sixers, man. Doc
Haven't
Rivers
seen
and the
a
Sixers. Here they
haven't seen a
are.
3-0 blown, but
No,
we
no.
live it, everything's bound to happen eventually, right? Except maybe Wilt Chamberlain's 101 points in one game. That seems
Yeah.
100 pretty hard to beat. Uh, but look, if we're just going down net rating right here, we're going to go into Phoenix versus New Orleans. Miami Heat has the best. Look, all of these stats are misleading. Let me preface this by that, because this is like through 4 games, but still, Miami Heat 14.5, Milwaukee 13.5. So those have been the two most dominant teams in their series. Hats off to Miami, because I thought this would be a 6 or 7 game series against Atlanta from what I saw with Atlanta last year, especially with John Collins back, and Miami beat him in 5 games. So without Butler in that 5th game. So hats off to them. Warriors third, Dallas 4, Memphis 5. That might change. Philadelphia 6, Boston 7. So Boston, because like I mentioned, their offensive rating, their defensive rating was relatively low for a dominant team with 115 a game. So it's not completely on, like, they completely shut down Kevin Durant and Kyrie. They shut down Kyrie completely, but Kevin Durant, they didn't fully. He had a couple games where he was pretty darn good. But Phoenix is right there. They've got, it's hard without Booker. We see that Booker's ascended to this top 15, top 10 player, fringe top 10, and they're struggling without him. That's their guy in the fourth quarter. Hit the big time shots. I know Paul can do it occasionally, and he showed that in game 3 against New Orleans. Where he came into New Orleans and just took over down the stretch, and he's more than capable of doing that again throughout the rest of the series. But they're in trouble, regardless whether they have a lead or not in the series. They're in trouble because, look, this is something that's going to tire them out. And if I know Dallas and Utah is going to go 6 games. I think it's 6 or 7 games, right? But Dallas is equipped to beat both of these teams, especially if Booker cannot return. Even if Booker does return, Dallas has a chance. I'm assuming Dallas wins that series because, Utah's pretty much dead in the water, in my opinion. I was surprised they won the game they did in game 4. And look, the Pelicans are playing great. And the
Jeez.
guys they find in the draft, like Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones and Brandon Brandon Ingram's really ascending into. I think no one's going to deny he's a top 20 player in the NBA right now. I mean, you could even make an argument he's top
No,
15. I don't want to go deep into recency bias, but he's definitely a top 20 player when you look at the grand scheme of things. So, what are your thoughts on this series? And then we'll go into uh, another series
um,
after that.
yeah, I love the Pelicans. First of all, they're Pelicans are kind of upholding that Clipper way. RIP to the Clippers, but my goodness, the Pelicans, you guys deserve this. Good gracious. They are playing with intensity, they're playing with grit, they're playing with fire. They don't back down. They have great defenders, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, and even Bi's been a pretty good defender. It's crazy to think how I wouldn't say fast this team gelled, but how how essential and how well oiled this machine is. Like, we didn't even think about the Pelicans as anything. I mean, they were 13 games under 500, just getting in. But like we said before, that one injury just changes the whole series, because I think with Booker, this series would have been over by now, probably in five. But the Pelicans, without Booker, they can put Herb Jones on CP3, and that made a whale of a difference. I mean, CP3 can't really play against like pressure, and I know this as a Clippers fan because back when OKC used to play us in the playoffs, that's what they would do. They would just get on him, pester him. They'd put Reggie Jackson on him. They'd put Cephalosha on him with length, and that's kind of what the Pelicans are doing. And Willie Green knows this. Willie Green reminds me so much of Ty Lue in terms of how he has rise to the occasion in this playoffs. Um, he has poise as a coach. He's very stern with his guys. He wants the best out of them, but he's so supportive. And I just see so many resemblances between him and Ty Lue. It's so awesome to have him as a coach for that team, because you can tell that they thrive off of what he tells them. And, Willie Green knows how to play Chris Paul. He played with him on the Clippers. And it's crazy to think that this series is tied right now when you think of how great the Suns were in the regular season and how bad the Pelicans were at one point. And here we are, 2-2 in April, late April. I think every Pelicans fan, win or loss in this series, is going to be so happy with the future of this team, and especially with the team this year. They don't even have Zion. Like, when you talk about the Suns missing Booker, they don't even have Zion Williamson. Zion looks great in the workouts. I still think that they hold him out for the rest of the year unless they go to the Western Conference Finals or something. But um, I think they hold him out for. But even next year, I mean, good gracious, you add Zion to that core, and that becomes. I've been saying this for a while. I may not have said it on a pod. I can't remember, but I truly believe that there'll be a top five, top six team in the Western Conference next year with a healthy squad. And you're seeing, I'm glad it's happening on a national stage. I'm kind of glad the Clippers lost, because you get to see the blossoming of this Pelicans team and why they're here. There's a reason why this team is here, and Bi is blossoming. Even Valanciunas is playing out of his mind. He's getting like double doubles that we've seen from like Shaq. I mean, he's getting like 26 and like 18 and 19. It's crazy. Um, so hats off to the Pelicans, regardless, regardless of what happens. I'm so proud of that team. Um, I do not like the Suns. That's pretty clear by how I'm talking about them. I dislike the Suns immensely. They beat my team in the conference finals. They acted like they were just going to skate their way to the finals this year, and they're getting tested. So
Yeah,
hats off to the
yeah,
Pelicans.
yeah. And you bring up Willie Green being similar to Ty Lue. Their demeanor is like almost identical, man. It's so weird the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they deal with their team. Like, it makes me wish the Lakers had a guy like that. Sheesh, man. A coach makes a huge difference. I think another statistic that goes, unnoticed is the Suns' defense, with or without Booker, with or without Paul, was dominant, third in defensive rating. Tied with Memphis for third defensive rating in the regular season, and they're just not playing the same defense. That's part of the reason. That's partly because with Bi, with CJ, it's a whole different team. We talked about this entering the playoffs. They were 11-2 or 11-3 rather, with Bi and CJ on the floor. They're playing great. Bi's 50% from three. We don't even need to discuss his 65% effective field goal percentage, which is ridiculous for 4 games. He can't miss. He's looking like I don't like to compare guys to KD, but he's kind of looking like a prime Kevin Durant right there in that series. And no one can guard him. And Mikal Bridges might be the best perimeter defender in the league, and he can't guard him. So look, there's nothing you can do. That's been the huge difference maker. And yeah, it's a whole different series if Booker plays. We all know that, or maybe it's not. Honestly, I mean, the way the Pelicans are playing, probably Booker makes the difference. It's a 5-game series, but 6-game at most. But this
Yeah,
could,
I just wanted to mention the Suns' 3-point shooting has been awful.
yeah,
Cam Johnson has been terrible from three.
yeah.
Jay Crowder has been terrible from three. It's kind of shocking to me because they're such a great 3-point shooting team with Shamit and Johnson and Jay Crowder and Booker, and now they just can't find it. And couple that with a defense that we thought was elite, and now it seems like they're just getting anything they want. The Pelicans. I mean, Brandon Ingram's just shooting right over Mikal Bridges, who we thought was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. It's crazy.
Percent. And it's funny you mentioned that 3-point shooting. It was great during the year, top 10 in the NBA. Partly, mostly, well, I don't know mostly or partly, but a big reason was Cam Johnson. 45% almost from three, 43, 44%, right? His EFG was over 60. So this is a guy that was really dominant from three who has disappeared in this series. Disappeared. And that's been huge. People talk about, look, we talked about this in previous podcasts. You can say all you want about Booker, Paul, Ayton, and Bridges being the core of this team, but without Johnson hitting threes, without Cameron Payne hitting threes, without Crowder hitting threes, it's really hard to win games. And this is putting a lot of pressure on Chris Paul and stress that he really didn't have during the year, because with or without Paul or Booker, they were still a dominant team. They were winning games with or without those guys, right? So this is a real test for them. I want to go into the Memphis-Minnesota series before we wrap up here. I don't want to go to Milwaukee, Chicago. That series virtually over. They'll be eliminated tomorrow night. I think we're on agreement there. In the Dallas-Utah series, we both know Dallas is going to win that series 6 or 7 games. So the Memphis-Minnesota series has surprised me because Minnesota has a real shot to win this series. This was a 55-win team during the year. And I thought Memphis would win in 5 or 6 games, even with I knew the Timberwolves were great, right? But the Timberwolves have played amazing on the road. That's off to them. What do you think about this series?
We didn't really think that this would be such a close series, and when the Clippers lost to the Timberwolves, I was like, man, this team's kind of good. Like they're kind of built for this kind of moment. And the Timberwolves, they could be up 3-1 in this series. I know we said that about a few series here, but they really could. I mean, they blew a 20-something point lead in the fourth quarter in one of these games at home. Um, and that stuff like that comes back to bite you, man, because if you would have had that game, you would have been up 3-1. You would have been kind of comfortable. And you could have got to the next series pretty easily, giving guys some rest. And here we are. Man, the series can go either way. Or know if they go back to Minnesota, how it's going to play out. And it's kind of tough to see one of these teams lose, because I love both of these teams and how gritty they are, and how young and exciting they are. But um, it's unfortunate that we're going to have one winner and one loser for this. I wish both could go on. I wish this was like the Western Conference Finals. This would be a really good one. But um, yeah, it could go either way. I'm not going to make a prediction. These Timberwolves, we didn't even think they would be contenders, and here they are with the 2 seed and putting up a fight. So it could really go either way.
Yeah, the Memphis series could go 7 games. It's probably going to go 7 games unless there's a game 6 win. So look, this is a great series. We both wish they could go far further. These are 2 young teams that are kind of blossoming in front of our eyes. Anthony Edwards is turning into a star, 2-way star. Thank you so much for listening to the Baller Sports Dialogue podcast. It's been your co-host, Brandon Deutsch, Graham Mona. Let's enjoy some basketball.